Oh, hello, another day, another video, another attempt at being good at doing intros to YouTube videos. Yeah, so this is, I'm assuming the title was going to say, the no wheel set 5, or sort of my starting point for it. And the cards that I looked at were quite good, and I'll walk through the sort of idea of it, and why I think it should be better placed in this meta than the set 4 meta. That's all dependent on a few decks and where they're going to land in the tier lists and the popularity. So in set four, yeah, it had a great run. That's kind of why I was hyping it. Green Steel was so popular. Uh, Blue Steel was quite popular as well. It was in that top four bracket of decks. The only issue I ever found was the two other decks in that top four bracket, Red Blue and Red Purple, just basically red decks that used red removal. It had quite a bad matchup into it. Brawl just nulls for three. They could null our entire draw mechanic, which was Hiram. When they play B prep, they would just set us back so far, and we couldn't really recover from it with a wheel and a fresh new big hand of cards. Um, so yeah, it really struggled into those matchups, and that's why I felt I just didn't feel confident bringing it. I bring it to a few store champs, and it just never performed well enough because it was like, oh, you get a few red purples, and then you're stuck down at the bottom tables, and then you're out really, and you haven't got enough to make it even through the Swiss. But in set five, there's some predictions going around. Let's see how the meta shapes out. People are thinking Steel Song's going to be so prevalent and so strong that it might be a sort of RP killer, which I can't see at all. And if Steel Song does rise to such a popularity that it's taking over RP as the top like meta percentage for a room, then RB should rise to meet it because RB is its natural killer. But I still think Steel Song is not as upset by it. They've got some of the steel cards that we are going to be using as well added to their roster. On top of that, they've got Daisy that just will aggro, get them so much lore. I mean, six lore really before there's a chance for them to answer. As I've seen, a lot of red decks are just relying on wait to three, use Brawl, and then take out the Daisy, or the other options are like use a Chromacon that buffs it, and then play like a Stitch that does a free one with Rush, or just some real things that are just going to murder their lists for other matchups. So I don't think they're going to go down that route. They're just going to keep it as we Brawl on three and we see where we go from there. But I don't know much about those decks, or at least that's not my cup of tea really. That's not what I focus in on. But we'll get back to Blue Steel, no wheel. I think it's in a really good spot. There's going to be again people doing really well with it in set four. There's going to be rooms. There's going to be metas. There's going to be matchups. There's going to be a line you could run an event where you get certain matchups into steel decks where it would have been stronger to play no wheel than it would be to play wheel. So definitely I think it's one to keep an eye on and watch out for. And I'm still playing it and testing it as well and actually enjoying it. But yeah, the sort of new additions that we've got, I'll run through the entire list. It's quite standard from the last one. The thing with no wheel, the reason why I've got Mickey in there and my wheel version has Tippo, we need to preserve hand size, and everything we do needs to sort of be quite an important reason why we did it. Whereas no wheel, or where the wheel lists, you can sort of throw your entire hand out there or throw it in the inkwell, wheel, and then just keep looking for answers that way. Whereas this version, you kind of need to everything you need to do has to really be impactful and important while you did it. For starters, yeah, I'm going to go with Mickey. Let's jump through the Captain Hook and Smee because that's just the combo that we're going to be going for, especially in this meta right now when people are playing so many small drops that are really impactful. Um, you know, Daisy's really strong. Captain Hook doesn't clear it, but we can start pressuring the board early on with that, and maybe do some maths with the Smee or fire the cannons to clear it out. Just more stuff on the board as well is just good. But yeah, these seem to be a strong package, and this has also brought people to want to play Merfolk and cards like that again. Just that, yeah, I mean, all the Lilos, the one drop Lilo as well is back, Maleficent. So these earlier powerful cards are just coming back and being played as well as the new ones that were released. So winning the board early or pressuring it early is quite important. So I feel these two combo quite well together. Mickey is there. Yeah, we've gone to Mickey on this build because on a Tippo turn, say if you played him on turn three, he will actually shrink your hand size, or turn two. It doesn't really matter which turn actually. Whenever you play him, he would shrink your hand size. So let's go with turn two. It's a better example. On turn two, if you were to play Tippo, it would shrink your hand size by three because you would have to ink, play Tippo, and then choose a card. And that's just too many cards out of your hand when you can't recover from it with a whole new world. Recover from Hiram is fine, but it's still going to be a slow recovery. It'll be two cards. then 2 more cards. And say if you want to ink, you're going to be inking and quilling or doing whatever else you want to keep shrinking the hand size at the same time. So I felt Mickey was good in this build to preserve the hand size. So yeah, that's the only reason I've restuck with him. Pete is there for Steel Song mainly, but I think there's a bit more to it. Overall, stopping someone using actions is just good. Green Steel has a load of Green Steel that the later versions, sorry, the current versions of Green Steel. They're still going to be doing like the Storm Rage on Strength and Zeus and stuff like that. So if you play things like a Tinkerbell and a few other characters, and you're like, I just want them to stick for a turn so they can start trading and I can set up a Cogsworth, you can play your stuff out and play Pete and go, just give me a turn of breathing room here because none of their characters are going to be able to do damage. They might be able to bounce, which is a bit painful for you, but there's no Pete that stops characters doing their abilities card yet. So yeah, he's very good into that. And into Steel Song, he's going to stop them wheeling and just going over you. All that steel removal that I just mentioned before in the Green Steel scenario would still be the same in the Steel Song scenario as well. In the mirror, it means that you can stall a wheel turn if they've got basically quilled down to wheel. You can be like, and you're not going to be able to wheel this turn. Sorry, play what you've got in your hand. Yeah, so he's quite impactful, and I'm hoping he will give us a bit of breathing room into RP. I think the biggest thing you can think RP or RB even, sorry. So the biggest thing you can think of is that it would stop a B prep happening, which is great. Yeah, you play it out and then they can't B prep for that turn. I think that's really good. But I think what will be more important is to on 7 if we can play Hiram and then Pete, because this will give us a 2 card draw. As long as they don't Medusa, we can get another 2 card draw. So we get 4 cards out of Hiram, which is really good, and they'll probably be playing stuff they didn't want to play. I think that would be a brilliant scenario, but I still think Medusa is going to be quite strong. I've even suggested to RP players or red players who've asked me to just basically 4x out Medusa. That wasn't to screw me over, that was just saying if you're in a Steel Song meta where your hands is going to be volatile all the time, and there's a card you would really like to play, I assume you would want to 4x it just so when you are getting wheeled, because RP has no way to stop wheeling, they will need to just 4x a card just to say the average of me having this in hand after a wheel or before a wheel is going to be still pretty good. But I'm not talking about too much red decks right now. But yeah, I still think Pete's really good. Even still, your opponent might not have the answer in hand, but they might have friends on the other side. They might have develop your brain, how far you go, anything that could dig. So you also stop them doing digging on their turn. Into certain decks, they just wanted to play an action against hyper aggro. They play that knowledge card thing. So I just think in general he's going to be pretty good to slow down and say, right, and I just need a turn to set things up and get ready. So yeah, he's going to be really good for that. As I say, most people will look at Pete and just think be prepared. I think that's not a bait play. There's going to be some times where I'll be like, I'm going to win on next turn as long as you be prepared. So I'll play Pete. That's a great scenario, but for the majority of the time, it might be like if they want to be prepared, it's going to do the same, weirdly in a weird way, the same effect as Pete would do because it would stall the turn. Because they would have to pay 7 to do it, and that's probably going to cost them their turn, and it will come back to you, and then you should be appropriate to flood the board again. But if you're in a scenario where you can win over 2 turns, it might be play your hand out, play your stuff out, Pete, and then win the following turn. So yeah, he's just going to be a great strong card. I'd look at maybe even getting him to 4x, depending on how well he is performing and how often we're feeling we need to play Pete. 3 isn't too expensive, but it is awkward. That means to do anything else with 5 extra ink is going to cost you 8 if you want a Tinkerbell Pete. It's 9 if you want Aerial Pete. That's 9. So he's good. He's not expensive. I'd say his cost is awkward. For what you get is very good. Especially in a deck like this where we just have no other answers for actions that removal actions at all. So yeah, I'm overselling Pete in here. You'll notice in my wheel list, I think I've got 1 there right now. But I'll probably even cut him again. I just feel in the wheel list it's moving too quickly, too fast. We don't really care about stalling them. I'm just trying 1 out to see what it does into Steel Song. It's either going to go to 2 or it's going to be cut. But in this one, yeah, I think Pete is quite an important card in the no wheel list. But besides that, yeah, we go on to sort of our draw package here, which is Hero and Beast. Same as set 4, 2 really good draw cards. You can play that line versus red purple where you can get the ramp early, so you can get a beast out and it can get you some extra card draw before they are almost forced to Medusa on that turn. So that's just really quite an impactful thing. Into steel matchups, they usually will throw out some steel removal, which you could come back to the peak being quite useful there. If you really want the card draw from the Tragic Beast, you could play it out on turn 8 and then beat Pete as well, not beat, Pete as well to just stall another turn out. So yeah, these are probably the most optimal cards for card draw in the game. If anyone wants to test Cheater, I've tried it. I didn't think it was that good. It costs you your turn two, but it costs you your SME on turn two basically, and that card's very good for controlling the board because once you play Cheater, it's unlikely you're ever going to want to exert her. The one extra card is nice, but you also have to do the work, so you're going to have to Quill. If you don't hit Quill and you hit Mickey, you only get one extra card, and then it's really awkward to try and get more card draw out of her, unless you just want to throw in for a trade. But then it's like a 2-1, you got one extra card, and she didn't really do much. Yeah, so yeah, she just wasn't really performing well enough. Steel removal will just take her out. I'm not going to protect her that hard. She's only a 2-1 for 2. So yeah, Chicha just wasn't really making the cut. She kind of felt like the card that could bring no wheel together, in my opinion. You know, just giving you that healthy amount of card draw to keep you going. But yeah, it just never really shined through. And you know, in a weird world, I'd even imagine an RP player, if you're not exerting it, would just brawl it or something, or even use that new Elsa card to take it out after a few turns of drawing. So yeah, she just wasn't really performing well. If you draw a late game, she just doesn't do much for you. So Cheetah's just not making it into my list, sadly. But these two cards, yeah, just probably the best card draw we have for that slot. Cogsworth's great because, of course, if we're going into saying no wheel wins a lot versus steel matchups, Cogsworth's the best card for that. Their removal all relies on doing damage to your characters, so if you can one resist that, it's really impactful to do that. You win the board harder. Into RP, of course, it still has its same issues. Big Sisu's going to hurt. I'm going to stop saying RP and just say red decks in general. The Big Sisu's still going to hurt it and take it out. But, of course, in this approach, we're going straight for we win our steel matchups and like all the other off-brand matchups, maybe even green-purple. Versus red decks, we don't win as hard with Cogsworth. He's just not that important. But yeah, he's got to be 4x then just to win the mirror, all the steel matchups, all the random janky things you might play against as well. Aerial, it's just really impactful. If you can get a dime set up, Pete Aerial, you can guarantee yourself 10 lore on that turn if you have enough items, which in a lot of scenarios you will do. You even get 11 lore if you quested for Pete as well. So yeah, she's just really, really quite good in this deck. If not, she's going to force them to play a Be Prepared. So for 6, you force them to play a 7 cost song. All the same things I mentioned about before. Just rocking her at 2 right now, but I could see that going to 3 again and maybe not using as many towers because she's just so impactful. But actually, I'll get into Tower. I regret what I just said about Tower there. But yeah, 2 has felt fine. Haven't played an extensive amount of games with her, but she's really good. Also, as well, versus the aggro decks. Um, when you win the board back, but they're still at like 11, 13 lore or something like that, so they've raced ahead. She's good to be like, and I play her, and I'll start catching up, and I'll start getting lore, because she's going to quest for 5 a turn. They might run a Fox into it, but if you play a Cogsurf out, it makes it even more awkward for them. And then they're not doing what they want to do, which is just race for lore. So yeah, she's just really quite strong in that. Kuzco, yeah, it's not as much for the steel and stuff like that. She can take out certain items. Kuzco can take out certain items. Queen's Castle in green purple and a few other sort of off-brand decks. Yeah, if there's any items out there you want to get rid of, it's clearly for Queen's Castle, really, Kuzco is, and can take out dimes in the mirror, which is just really good, making it out of tower range as well because it goes into the inkwell. I rate Simba and Kuzco both equally as good as each other. I think they've both got their benefits to each other. Not giving someone ramp is really big, and then all the things. So Simba's quite good in that regard, and then all the other things that Kuzco does, in my opinion, is just really, really strong. He quests for 2, so he's not a terrible dime target. If you're just playing off the top, you play it and you tap for 2. Um, yeah, and that 4 cost to add 1 resist to every one on your board. Just strangely, the more times you play with Kuzco, the more times you notice how good that is. If you have a Cogsworth set up and you play it, now of your characters have 2 resist and he has 1 resist, and the Cogsworth gets 1 resist as well. If you have 2 cogs out, it just layers, so you've just got even more resist for the board. And if you've ramped quite high, 4 isn't particularly too expensive to play. Especially if you're not doing much else that turn. Maybe you're just dime tapping a turn or something like that. Um, so yeah, I just think he's just a lot better in all of the regards. The ramp is not amazing, but we sort of just got to live with that downside, and just everything else about the card's good. You play it, you take out a location or an item, and then you also have a singer set up. Not as impactful in No Wheel, besides for Grab Your Swords, but he is still just really strong, and I just opted to play him more. And my main reason was to swap over to him was the E-Quest for 2. But I found the resistibility also as well, just really quite good. Hiding the dime from a tower, I felt not as amazing, only because blue still just plays so quickly. If they have the opportunity to play tower, retrieve dime, use dime, you've probably lost anyway. So hiding the dime in the inkwell isn't that big, but it is also something worth mentioning. Yeah, of course for Tinkerbell because she's just amazing. Um, I don't really need to go into detail about too much. Three, grab your swords, but you could honestly go up to four if you really just want to be like I am, the thing that just beats steel matchups. That could easily be achievable. You could cut down somewhere else. But yeah, three has been fine for me, and I've always felt fine with three. And whenever I go to four, I feel it's overkill. So yeah, three is fine. It's the Hades and the Simba are always two things that shine quite heavily in no wheel. You don't lose the board too hard, but it's nice to be able to play something and just sort of do an on play and then win the board heavier with it because you put a two quester, 3-5 or a 5-7 on board, and they're going to struggle to deal with that. This also goes back to my point of no wheel that whenever you do an action or you do not an action, sorry, because that's actually a thing in the game. Whenever you do something, you want to maximize the value you can get out of it. So let it go is really good in a wheel deck because it will be like I'm wheeling, diming. You played a tower, cool. Let it go. Let's keep wheeling. Let's keep going. Let's keep drawing. You don't really have that privilege in no wheel, so it's good to be like, I'll pay the two extra. It's non-inkable. Okay, your tower goes in the inkwell, or your whatever goes in the inkwell, your Cinderella goes in the inkwell, and I get a 3-6 on board the quest for two as well. So we've equaled out the board. We've got a lot of value out of that ink, the ink we've paid for that turn. So yeah, he's just really good in that regard. Yeah, he's mainly there to take out towers and stuff like that. But just into a lot of decks, you'll find that giving them more ink doesn't really matter too much. Or at least giving them one doesn't matter too much. If you do both Cusco and Hades, and yeah, no, I've given them two ramp, which isn't amazing. But yeah, you'll find most times just giving them one if there's just like a something on the board that's just like pressuring too hard and you just don't want it to be there. You could just play it out. You're seeing the new Clarabelle card come in that's quite impactful. You can play it on that and just put that in the inkwell. I'm trying to think of other cards. Tamatoa, Mufasa in the mirror as well. Just screw that card. No, yeah, bless it. I like that card. But you could play it on that, and they've played 8, lost 2 ink, and you've just paid a 7 cost, took it out, and you've got a 3-6 2 quester on board. And I bet 9 times out of 10, if you Hades a Mufasa, you're going to win the game. But yeah, I just think that's really good to state. Simba, of course, is good for dealing with steel matchups and stuff like that. So um, Steel Song does play World's Greatest Criminal Mind, but we're just gonna have to look past that they have that card. You play it on play, you deal 2 damage, so the likelihood of you taking something out in Steel Song is very high. They've got piglets and stuff like that, and one drops that you can just deal 2 damage with, or you can like add it up with the maths and deal 2 damage and deal another 2 from somewhere else. And just deal some strong stuff. And if it sticks, it's just going to do nothing but control the board and continuously like keep it in check. So it's just a great card. You'll be surprised how many times you use the draw 2, discard 2 ability. If you're like, all right, in this matchup, I need to find dime, you play it and draw 2, discard 2, and it's just really good in that regard. And into red matchups, it's out of range of Medusa. So you play it out and it will start controlling the board until they B prep. So sometimes even just playing the Simba out will cause a B prep because they won't know how to deal with it. I guess they've got Maleficents, but you know, it's just really impactful. As soon as you put it on the board, it will do an on play. It will instantly change the tempo and the tension of the matchup. So he's just very good. So add both of these two together. When you get to that ink, they just really impact the board and they're just really important to have in the deck, in my opinion. 4x Tower, I just said take one out for an aerial, but I'd actually say keep them. Tower sort of comes into the draw package of the deck as well. If you're going to ramp to 8, you'll get your popsicles back, you'll get your fortifiers back, so you can start drawing as well. If it sticks, it keeps drawing, questing, gives lore. It kind of brings the whole deck together, really, so actually don't get rid of any Tamatowers. Yeah, it's going to work well with the Hiram. It's going to continue cycling the cards through until you find a dime or until you find answers and stuff like that. 5/8 is really good on board. It's going to be really impactful. If they have a cheap answer for it, like World's Greatest Criminal Mind, You're Welcome, or whatever, that is bad, but it's still, it's Tamatoa. You need to know the risks when you play it on the board. But yeah, I think it goes together with the Hiram and the Beast. It's a little bit more towards your win con than it is your draw package, but it's still quite important to mention that it's good for your draw package because it recycles your items that continue your draw. So yeah, I think 4x Tower is just way to go of no wheel as well. And you can be like, I'll play a tower, they'll remove it. I'll play another tower. Oh, I don't have any removal. Cool, we'll start making some work with this card then. It's just really good. We'll do the two fire the cannons. I mean, you're seeing most people going 4x on it. I started 4x fire the cannons in the wheel list. I think in a wheel list you can afford to play a lot of cheap removal. I think that's fine. But for the hand economy in a wheel list, it's kind of bad if you're just going to be throwing out cheap damage removals and your hand's just going to be shrinking and you haven't really progressed your win con. You've just killed like a 2 drop or a 1 drop. In general, that's just not great. But two is fine. I feel like you could throw two out and be like, yeah, and that's that done. We killed a Diablo, or we did the maths to kill a Daisy with a hook or a Smee. But yeah, in general, I don't want to go too heavy on early removal because we just, in hand economy wise, we can't afford to shrink our hand that little and spend it on cheaper removal cards like that. So keeping it at two is fine for me. Yeah, I just talked about grab your swords and the whole item package. I mean, none of that is changing. It is worth mentioning that I think with no wheel, because finding the dime is a bit harder. You can't just wheel and keep looking for a dime. You just have to basically hope you get it with your sort of filtered draw for your Hirams and Tragic Beasts and stuff like that. So it is worth mentioning you could cut dime. I know that sounds insane, but you could cut dime and you could go for manners. You could go for a more mid-range build and just hope to win early or hope to win mid-range. Sorry. Just not reliant on the dime as much because now the dime can't be treated. It can be treated as a win con versus red purple, but it can't really treat it as a win con versus red blue. They have so many answers for the dime now. They're just going to be quicker than you. So maybe the options would be to play locations and just try cheese out law, play stuff on board, play Pete, stall a turn, turn sideways, win. That's just worth mentioning. I haven't travelled down that avenue yet. I was an early adopter of Dime and I've just always loved it since. McDuck Manor is still a strong card though, a 1/4. They gain you 2 law. If you play a couple of them and then you play some characters on boards and they just don't know what to remove, they'll have to be prep and then you have to flood again. But yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that no dimes could be an option as well with no wheel. Especially it's just finding the dimes. You seem to find them at the wrong times and it's just, yeah, it can be a bit tricky. But yeah, that's sort of the list in general. I don't want to go too much into the no dime stuff because there is 2 dimes in the list. But just to sort of old time's sake, I'll do a simulation of a sort of mulligan for no wheel versus just a sort of blind play. So looking at this hand, it's not too bad. We've got some things we want to keep in here. These things are too big. You really hunt for the Hirams a bit more in no wheel, just because it's going to replenish your hand and it's going to force an instant removal from them. So we do have a 1, 2, and then we've played that on 4. I'd be a bit reluctant to keep the Captain Hook, but if we don't have anything at all else to play, it's going to be bad. We're only really hunting for a Smee, and with a 3, like sort of look in deeper, we might get the Smee. I might even get rid of the Beast, but on the play, actually, I think I'd probably keep it. So yeah, I think this would be fine. And yeah, that's not too bad, I guess. And then you start with probably Ink, probably a Cogsworth, maybe, and then play a Thought Sphere out. Hopefully, you draw Smee, because Smee on 2 is just brilliant. But if it's got to be a Captain Hook, it's got to be a Captain Hook. And we're noticing the Flynn, Flynn is still a thing, but I'm seeing it's dropping to 3 in people's lists and stuff like that less. So maybe don't be afraid too much about Flynn's as you should have been in the past. If they have it, they have it, cool. But there's so many other threats now to deal with, like with Steel Song and Green Steel, and just all these like earlier aggro decks, even hyper aggro is quite important. So just not having anything on 2 is really bad. So if the turn 2 has got to be a Captain Hook, it's got to be a Captain Hook, I'm afraid. But on the draw, it's still not too bad. I think all I would really want to keep though from here is just these 2 because we want to have a 1-drop, we want to have a Hiram. I think we want a better 5-drop than a Cogsworth because we can't guarantee the matchup would require the Cogsworth. So yeah, that ends up being not too bad. We draw for turn. I'd look what the card is that I drew and probably ink that instead. play the Portugal out, and then next turn hopefully draw something that's actually a bit ink starved this hand. Play something else that we drew. Otherwise, Tinkerbell sadly would have to go. Get the Smee out, get the Mickey out, start drawing double Mickey because we have to because we've got three in hand. And yeah, just sort of flood the board, keep playing pressure, keep ramping. Hopefully, with three Mickeys played, we'll get to Tamatoa range quite soon, and we can just get them out there and start threatening stuff. Tamatoa or Simba or just something big on the board, and start winning it back because we would be on the draw in this scenario I said. But yeah, that's sort of the list. Yeah, I hope people sort of play it and enjoy it. I think it has. There's rooms where it would be the stronger choice than a wheel list. If your locals is all testing Steel Song and Hyper Aggro, I'd definitely say no wheel is just a lot better into that game, into that room, than a wheel deck would be. But on the flip side, there's going to be loads of scenarios where wheel lists is just going to be better, and then it's not going to be terrible into the hyper aggro and stuff like that. But yeah, it all depends, I think, in my head where the reds like meta sort of lands. And I don't see RP and RB going anywhere. It's just depends on where it lands and how many people pick up Steel Song and if hyper aggro is going to sit around for any longer. But yeah, thank you for watching that.